Roger Marker to open our hui. Kia ora.
Ata Māria tātou, tēnei rangi tuatoru o te wiki o te reo Māori, mi atu kia tātou katoa. Kia noi tātou, e tō mātou matu i te rangi, tēnei mātou au panongo e nei ki a koe. E te matu e tūpura atu mātou, ngā whakamōmit o whetai ki a koe, mao manaakitanga i ngā wā katoa. E te matu e anganei mātou ki a koe, hei kia tata mai koe, hei awhina tia, hei aritaki a mātou, i ngā mahi i mui a mātou tēnei ata. E te matu e whakakahi a mātou i roto te kaupapa o tēnei komiti. Ngā wā katoa e mahi ai mātou, hei karore au tau i ngā tapu, ko hi praiti hoki tō mātou anaki. Āmene.
Āmene. Kia ora matua. No mai hoki mai ki tēnei hui kia te aki te taio. So welcome everyone to the Environment and Integrated Catchments Committee meeting. Do we have any notices? I have one notice. I just want to mihi to Councillor Rick Barker for supporting me in this role. And there's a whakatauki or a proverb I want to share with everyone that might reflect this situation. It's ka pū te ruha, ka hao te rangatahi. So as the older fishing net comes in, the new generation of net goes out for fishing.
Very appropriate.
Older. Do we have any apologies?
No holes in this net, though.
The old decrepit net.
Yes.
What kind of fish? I have a funeral to go to at 2 o'clock in Hastings,
2
so
o'clock.
I have to leave
Kia
at
ora.
1:30.
Thank you. I have apologies from Councillor Charles Lambert and Councillor Wolf Foley.
I move the apologies be accepted.
Thank you. Mover, Councillor Barker. Seconder, Councillor Van Beek. So all those who agree with that, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against? Carried. Kia ora. Any conflict of interest declarations? Confirmation of the 1st of July minutes.
I'll move.
Have a mover. Will we please have a seconder? Kia ora. Councillor Foss, would you like to speak? Would you like to speak?
No, thanks.
No? Kia ora. So all those who agree, kōrero mai aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Follow-ups from previous meetings. Who would like to run this?
Chair, can I suggest we just take those all as read?
Yes.
There is a commentary in relation to all of them.
Papai, any
Happy to
questions?
Take questions.
No questions? Oh, fine. Yep, can I have a mover and a seconder,
move.
please? Councillor Barker. Seconder. Councillor Graham, would you like to speak? Oh. Okay. All those who agree, kōrero mai aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Call for minor items.
Over one. Time.
Time. Right.
Profound.
No other minor items?
Sidereal time. Intergalactic time.
Wow, we're doing swimmingly here, thank you. Okay, decision items. Item 6, call for the Certificate of Appreciation nominations. We have Leanne here, or who would like to present this?
Look, I think the paper speaks for itself. It covers what has been a practice for the last few years of council to issue certificates of appreciation to members of the community who have made a contribution to the regional environment. There are 3 categories which we've had historically, and the process is to call for nominations from councillors and draw upon councillors' knowledge and engagement with constituents they think are worthy of recognition. So that's the process we've run historically, and we're proposing that the nominations open again for the next couple of weeks. So if we could have proposals to Leanne by the 30th of September, that would be fabulous.
Fantastic. Any questions?
Oh, no, I was just going to move the paper be received.
Okay.
Chair, so James, just clarify that, so we have 2 or 3 weeks to think about this?
2 weeks effectively. So,
2 weeks?
Yep.
Okay.
It's by
And we'll-
30th of September.
We'll send a reminder to you all closer to the deadline.
Any other questions? Oh, we have a mover. Can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Graham, would you like to speak to it? Councillor Barker?
No, thank you.
Councillor Graham?
I do. I just implore councillors to really think hard on this because it's really important, and there are people out in our community who do amazing things, and they mostly do it quietly, and this is a really good opportunity to recognise them. And we've found over the past that they really enjoyed being recognised, that it's a good thing on all round, that they're doing good stuff, we recognise them, and everyone gets to know about it. So think hard, you've got 2 weeks to fill 3 spaces.
Kapai, we're going to see some deputations this afternoon that might inspire us to think of the people within our community working really hard for our environment. So I'd like to put this to the floor for the recommendation to be adopted. Those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Kia mana, carried. Kia ora. Okay, item number 7. Tom. Bit of time. Kia ora, Marianne, when you're ready.
Kia ora Chair, kia ora committee members. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. This is going to be the penultimate in what must feel like a series of relentless presentations on water security, with the final one potentially coming to you at a workshop on the 30th of this month. This particular paper was programmed to come to you, but has come to you a little bit sooner as a result of the resolution at the corporate strategic meeting earlier in the month, and the resolution is set out there in the paper. So So I won't repeat that resolution, but the paper just effectively reinforces the role of the regional water assessment as in terms of doing a lot of the heavy lifting of the engagement around the water security program. The paper discusses a number of options for sort of a targeted and focused community engagement. One of the options is not preferred, based on probably some of our recent experiences. And the other 2 options, one's probably a little bit faster, and the third option, which is effectively is relatively novel. It is a new approach, and so that's why we've discussed it in more detail. And I think it builds on some what I would call relatively positive engagement experiences we've had more recently that have led to some good results. Option 3 would require us to embrace, some of the uncertainties in new areas of a co-design process, and as a result makes it more difficult to sort of set out exactly how it would be programmed and look. But and I think we'd just be required to take a sort of bit more of an agile, sort of adaptive planning approach. So I really don't want to. So Marianne's here. We can answer any more questions specifically about the regional water assessment, but I really just want to make the point that we believe that the community engagement piece should be sort of carried through that regional water assessment program. So just really happy to take questions on the paper.
Questions from the floor?
Yeah, Tom, thanks for the paper. I do have a question, but I want to give you some background to it. So I always had a strong view that we're elected as councillors and that we should make the decisions on these things. And this is effectively the delegating some of that communication over to another group of people who public haven't elected. So I have some challenges with that, but I could be convinced if you think that, because another bit of background to it is that there is a amazing ignorance out there in the community about the water issues that other than storage. Well, there's a prejudice that that we are just driving to storage and not looking at other alternatives. So that's something which we haven't managed to. It's a hurdle which we haven't managed to get over, despite the fact that we've tried very hard. So, do you think that the panel, having a panel such as you've proposed, would help get over that hurdle? Because I could agree with it if you thought that.
So thanks for the question. It raises a number of sort of helpful points to discuss. I think one of the points is that a difference between communications and engagement, and I think HBRC still has a very strong role in terms of the communications of the program and carrying that. And so this is as much focused, probably more weighted towards the engagement piece around how do we engage with the community and so that they are understanding in a targeted and focused way, as opposed to just doing that engagement through communication, which is can be quite challenging. In terms of the delegation of political authority, it's not proposed that we do that, and I think the paper actually sets out that we think the panel should not necessarily, apart from perhaps the issue of HBRC role in chairing the group, should not actually, have necessarily strong political membership across the region, and that is because ultimately these decisions are going to be political decisions and they are going to be taken at this table, and so this process is in some ways being suggested as a way of giving political decision makers confidence that there has been strong and high level community engagement for the recommendations that will ultimately come through to you at the end of this process. And your final point around an informed, how do we make sure that this, when you are making decisions that we do have an informed community, that is the very role of the regional water assessment, is to help educate the community around these options and also demonstrate that regional council or the region is not only looking at hard path solutions, but is also has turned its mind to what you might call soft path solutions for solving water security. So it very much is that education piece. So if you want to go faster and more precise, then perhaps the best option is for HBRC to, for us as staff to effectively carry that role and do the targeted engagement with those groups, and then try and carry the community education piece on its own. But what we're just putting in front of you here today is perhaps an alternative model, not too dissimilar to a sort of a hearings type process that removes some of the risks that we've experienced and experiences around collaboration processes which never really sort of move past their interests. We'll certainly carry that risk. So I'm just being careful. The paper says that we are not making a recommendation between those two options. So,
Chair, could I just make the additional comment in relation to, I think, the very specific question from Councillor Graham, and that is at the risk of stating the obvious. There's no guarantees that this is going to get this won't get difficult and won't get bogged down. I think this is quite a political call, really, about the nature of the engagement that you want to see alongside the already planned communications program that Tom's referred to. We can pump a lot of information into the community about what we're doing and why we're doing it, but to some extent that's quite a traditional model of kind of propose and defend. What we're talking about here is a deeper level of engagement, several different ways that you might like to think about going about it. If you want to de-risk the possibility that the council gets out of step with community sentiment, or that we don't take people along with us on the journey to the extent that we might otherwise. So there's a judgment call, I think, for you all, and there's lots of experience around the table in terms of these issues and the water politics of the region, so you're probably best placed to make that assessment of what is the best way of managing the community's many and varied interests through this process.
Councillor Curtin.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to go to a point that Councillor Graham raised, and I think it affects the entire approach we've got, and it's really this notion that we are perceived to be substantially committed, biased, orientated around storage options at almost the exclusion of everything else, and for better or for worse, potentially that's the perception that's out there. And the response that you have put up, Tom, has been very much, no, that's not the intent. But when I look at at your paragraph 14 and the program structure, any reader looking at that would be automatically drawn to a conclusion that, and indeed, our focus is on storage. The two pillars of this three-legged stool, or it looks like a three-legged stool, say we are, and I'm wondering, in fact, whether we need to reset the structure that we're proposing. Clearly, it's not to say water storage is not part of the process. Clearly it is, but the way it's tabulated here would indicate to someone that, in fact, yeah, that's what we're doing. And by the way, these, and I have to put my glasses on to read them.
Yeah.
These other sort of strategies are a dim second and third to that. Is there any other thought around how we might, in fact, retabulate and restructure this program structure so that, in fact, it says what we think it should say?
So that's really good feedback, and we've heard that before, and so perhaps I've been at risk of thinking this in terms of the applications that we made and the boxes those have sat through and have been kind of path dependent on that. So I think that's good feedback, and I think we do need to do that because we've heard that elsewhere, and look, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about, you know, our storage investigations are around identifying what's viable and then feeding that information into the big decision at the end in terms of whether or not you want to proceed with what are a range of viable options. So I think that's work we will take away and we'll do.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, it finds its way into, if you look, for example, at the Appendix 2 attachment. There again, it's actually permeating right through the thinking, and I think we need to reframe that.
Yeah, and I think because of lockdown and because of what we could actually get on with and do early, I think the storage bits got up and out of the block early and through the dry and things like that. So that's probably reinforced that view.
Succinct question, Councillor Barker.
I'll be as succinct as the last two questioners.
I just put my timer on.
And I'll put the question word first. What confidence can we have in the examples you've given us of the models that we put forward in the paper? Tank, which was well underway when I first came to this council, been going for 10 years and still hasn't reached a conclusion. The Tuki group on the water ended in a bitter disagreement on how things were done, etc. And the other one was about the capital restructure. The capital restructure review didn't come up with the IPO, it was the chairman, Rex Graham. And it was, in my view, it failed to do what it should have done. So 3 examples you give, in my view, don't give me any confidence. So how am I wrong in that? I want to come back because I've got an alternative view of how to go along with where Councillor Graham is. I just don't think they worked.
So, Councillor, if your question is how are you wrong, I'm not going to be bold enough to tell you.
I want you to be able to demonstrate the tank was a success of speedy, effective decision making.
So those first two examples you've given in terms of tank and the forum, we are saying in the paper are examples of why you wouldn't pursue option one. I see those as examples of option one, of effectively forming a group of the various sector interest groups on the issue and putting them in a room and asking them to sort of map a way forward. So if that doesn't come through in the paper, apologies. It's we are putting those up as examples of potentially a pathway that we don't take in terms of the recommendations. In terms of the capital structure review, it looks like I was peripherally involved at the start, but I did. What I am saying is that there was an independent panel that was brought to bring and help guide the discussion before it came back to council for that decision making, and so how that option ended up being one of the recommendations of the panel. I'm not cited on, but it was an example of a separate body making a recommendation to decision makers and then decision makers taking it from there. But a separate body, not necessarily made up of the range of individuals and groups that then council then consulted with through its decision. Once its decision was made.
My question is to the chair: is there an opportunity in here to put forward an alternative proposal?
Once everyone's had a chance to speak.
Sure, thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now, the question I have is that my understanding, going back to the resolution from the Corporate and Strategic meeting, is that the option 2 or option 3 would be a form of time-bound inquiry.
Yes.
Where either the staff or the panel, with some political involvement from this council at least, would go to the different stakeholders that are referred to in that resolution and seek their views about the core topic of the regional water assessment in the 3 phases you outlined, and then give a recommendation back having done that. Can you just break down the phases of either the staff or the panel's inquiry function? How many times and when, for what purpose, for example? Would they go to the stakeholders? Would they go at the outset and say, hey, this is what we're doing, what should we include? And then go back, well, we're now talking about the specific topic, what do you think about that topic? And then back at the end, here's a draft before we recommend, do you want to feedback on our draft? I mean, is that the kind of model you had in mind? And what would be the specific phases of when they go to each of the stakeholders, do you think?
So thanks, Councillor. Look, in the interest of keeping the paper as brief as possible, I mean, we could have potentially mapped out a whole bunch of options going forward, but under the panel option, the presumption is that the panel will have a big influence on how it wants to do that. Right. But I do believe that in principle, and the paper goes there, is that there's not a suggestion that this panel is formed and then staff go away for 12 months or 8 months and do a whole bunch of work and present it to the panel. That doesn't meet the requirements of your resolution. So the suggestion is that the panel would identify those groups that needed to be engaged early so that they understood the regional water assessment, what's proposed, and then can take some of the feedback and views around how is that assessment, what are the issues that are going to be covered and how could it do that. And then to the extent that the panel felt it was a good view to maybe do some relatively sort of thorough engagement with those sector groups and get a view that informs, or just an advisory role. I mean, we'd probably take the guidance from the panel, but we think that we could accommodate relatively solid engagement, and not only across interest groups but through the region. But we'd have to be guided by the panel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the other question I had is, has Councillor Curtin read the communications plan?
Councillor Foss.
Quite interested in that answer. Looking for spelling mistakes in it, no doubt.
Looking for the word damn, no doubt.
No cut. Oh, no, it was a friendly jab. Thanks. Can I ask, I'm a bit torn here in the fact that wanting to get things done.
Yes.
And as Councillor Barker and Graham noted earlier, we've been around this mulberry bush a few times, and I'm torn between that and the merits of what you're trying to achieve with greater buy-in participation perhaps from the community, and the fact that we've had a drought.
Mm-hmm.
Water situation across parts of our region is still very low. We have water insecurity everywhere. We have a whole lot of things in train which are in this space, be it tank, be it potential Hiratonga issues, the pilots in Central Hawke's Bay, etc. So I'm quite torn that this is not a massive kicking for touch, and in 12 or 18 months' time, we collate this information, which is nice, and we've had lots of buy-in, and all the caveats around, well, we'll get the response from those that we ask, not necessarily the 160,000 that don't engage with the council, but benefit from water use in the region. So that's kind of where I start. Also, the key is who would be on these particular panels or the project team, which I tend to favour, simply because it's got definitive and defined parts. But your paragraph 21 pulls this out as well. Given this, the risks and opportunity, nor the approaches, given the sense of urgency and short timeframes, option 2 would be the most streamlined and easiest to implement by the team. Because this is not ground zero. This is ground 10 years plus another day, or I don't know how tank's been going on, 9 years, whatever it might be. So this council's been thinking about things water since its start. That's its job. And so there's so much information in the tank. And then you note this in para 23, where you go, options 2 and 3 better account for the fact that there is currently no new information to discuss with the wider community. No new information. Yes, it may be coming with the helicopter stuff. So as a council, we should be engaging as much and as deeply and as widely and encouraging participation as we can, but we can't force it. So can you kind of explain a bit further why you've looked at 1, 2 and 3, you've looked at 2 in particular, you're kicking towards 3, yet right here you say there is nothing new to talk about or consult on. There may be new information coming. My point is, again, there's always new information coming, and there's always a new angle or political cycle before us. So can you just comment further on your going for 3 over 2, and also that this is not ground zero, and a lot of this to me is actually almost business as usual as part of our engagement as a council, those core assets, environmental assets that we try and treasure.
Okay, so thanks, Councillor. Look, just echoing the Chief Executive's comments earlier, look, we've explained 3 more because it's new, but we're saying 2 or 3. I don't believe this process is going to slow any of the. I think that process would slow anything down. The regional water assessment, all those projects are up and running, and we're going as fast as we can on them. But we need to, if we can go faster, or we can limit our inquiry into certain solutions, or focus on them and present those to you. But it's probably the view of staff that we're going to get a better buy-in to a broader inquiry, which is what we need to do through the regional water assessment. We did hear from you at the corporate and strategic that we wanted to be engaging hard and fast in the community on these issues. In terms of the storage projects, what we're proposing is just effectively, just as you've described, just BAU, community awareness. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Mostly with those who are affected by those investigations. And so that's we're not saying that that is going to be the work of the panel to try and sort of drag that in. That sort of comes at the end. I think I hear you saying that you're very keen for us to get on with it and not reinvent any wheels, or kick any cans down the road. I'm not sure what we could be doing faster to achieve that. Look, and we'll, we've seen with CHB and we're experienced with Heratonga, identifying, infrastructure options is just not a quick game.
I realise that,
Yeah.
and thanks, Chair, just a couple more. And so, but it's the quick doesn't start now. The quick's been going for quite some time. The
Correct.
study has been going for quite some time. We have a huge amount of IP, intellectual property knowledge, growing scientific knowledge and environmental, etc. That'll always keep growing.
Yes.
At some stage, the buck does stop here,
Yes.
and those that fund us, own us, pay for us, look to us for leadership, ask us actually make a call. And I'll keep saying most of the community don't engage with us until there's some kind of disaster or impending issue happening, such as a drought, such as everyone runs out of water, such as contaminated water, etc. That's our job. So what I'm hearing you, or am I right in hearing that in parallel, whatever option, if we go down this route, and B, if we take one of these three options, it's in parallel with work that's already happening. For
Yes.
example, if one of the Heratonga projects successfully gets across the line and there's nothing in and around what's proposed here, if it was to start, that anyone could use to impede, to veto, to point to lack of consultation or something, of things we've already set in train, that this process could interrupt and essentially put on pause. That's my fear, that again, this can be used, because again, this is starting now, all these other things have started, continue, and in many of these conversations around this table, everyone is so ambitious to try and do stuff to help the core scarcity issues across Hawke's Bay with respect to all of the stakeholders involved. Everyone's bending over backwards. We'll have to make a call here in the not too distant future. I'm very, very fearful with whatever route, with total respect to the need to have ownership from the community, that this could be used for unintended purposes, to put pause or hold on things that are already starting. Can you give us some kind of assurance that that cannot happen?
That cannot happen. That cannot happen for a number of reasons. Is that the program has specifically been designed to bring these paths together, and so because the storage investigations, as Councillor Curtin referred to before, they're not on their own pathway. They are specifically designed to join, to be developed, so that we understand what's possible, to link in with this work, and then present the community with a broad set of decisions. And so we're not suggesting that this panel has a decision-making power or takes away that political imperative. So that when you, as political leaders, then have to say, okay, what are we going to do? What are the suite of interventions that we're going to stand up or prioritise to solve this riddle? That you have some confidence that there's been robust technical analysis around some of the options, and there's been a robust discussion and analysis of other options, and then they come into a single point for that decision-making process. And I don't think the storage discussions are not designed to get ahead of that, but they're not. But they are always going to have to require a political decision.
Chair, can I offer a suggestion that I think perhaps one way of thinking about the community panel prospect is more of an advisory group to council and to the council committee, and it helps give you some reassurance that in Tom's work that a range of perspectives are being brought to bear and assumptions are being tested. And the parallel previous experience that I would use as perhaps a better comparison to the ones Councillor Barker cited earlier was the panel that was requested by Council when I was asked to undertake a review of the Ruataniwha water storage scheme. So people might remember then I was asked to have some engineering expertise, some farming expertise, some environmental expertise, and we assembled a panel. I think it was 6 or 8 on that panel, and their job was to meet with me as all of the work streams came in, and they sort of stress tested the advice we were getting on a range of different issues and options. And they provided Council, I think, with some reassurance that there wasn't one person sitting in a dark room by themselves doing the review and the analysis, that there were other eyes and ears being brought to bear with some experience and skill. And from my perspective, that really strengthened the quality of the review and the review report. And I think it provided more reassurance ultimately to the community that that was a thorough and robust job. So I think that's probably the closest analogy I can think of what's been proposed here.
Thank you.
Eddie White?
Yes.
I just have a question. Before I ask the question, though, James, I actually thought you were sitting in a dark room when you did that.
I agree with him. It's now a revelation there are other people helping you.
It's a revelation that you had engineers and...
Well, they were hand-picked by Council, actually. There was quite a debate over those names. And,
is that right?
Yeah.
I don't recall that. It's all a maze. The question is to you, though, James. Do you think that, and Tom, I want a yes or no on this, that if we had a panel, that it would be helpful in our endeavours on water security right through the Ruhi?
Standing panel.
Yes.
Look,
my view is that one of the biggest risks we have with this project is that this gets pigeonholed as an HBRC driven project that has a narrow lens on it, and that we're not taking the holistic view that a range of people in the community are looking for.
the answer is yes, you think it'd be good. Tom, you think it'd be good or bad? Or you put it up. But the panel is a good idea.
It's not without risk, but I think it's a good idea.
Are there any other questions from our committee members?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been sort of listening to the debate and pondering this. In principle, I'm in favour of this approach because, as Councillor Barker said, the previous history and other major projects have stumbled and bumbled and taken many years and often not got anywhere. And the councils of have put out their concerns on how it affects their powers and all that sort of stuff. That's not my concern, that's their concern. But my concern, my curiosity part is, how does that work with the other work of the council? Is the council going to have other subgroups or forms that concentrate on water or some section of water security? Because from a general public point of view, that's an issue. So if another block of funding comes along and then period by central government, and then council sets up another group looking at a certain aspect of water, and then you've got this panel over here that comes together. So is that likely to happen? I guess that's the first question. Are other jurisdictions within the council going to work independently, totally independently from this panel and its advice?
So I would say so much of our work, as an entire organisation, relates to water, and so this piece of work really is around water supply and demand. So it's around water quantity, and it is relatively time bound in terms of the project. So I would think that issues relating to that are probably, for the foreseeable future, a program to be dealt with through this. So I would say that if there's, I think this is carrying the water quantity discussion, and so to the extent that, I know it's not good to break water down and compartmentalise it, but like all the work that's coming into relation to, you know, freshwater reform and, you know, looking at all Chris's work and things like that, I mean, they stay on their projects. This is not trying to sort of take some, you know, carry the entire water debate.
Okay, I accept that and I think that's wise. Then the council should very clearly label it as such.
Right.
I'm not saying that just to take your words, water supply and demand, that may be not the right phrase, but if that's what this panel's all about, then it should be clearly labelled that. If you have this wide-ranging thing like water security or some other water health or something like that, anything goes in the mix.
Okay.
I'm talking from the general public point of view. But if the general public knew this was about primarily supply and demand, or however you want to phrase that in an accurate way, then there's no mistaking what this is about, and maybe the panel itself will keep focused, because water's an endless argument, and we've got already confusing arguments from the public point of view, from national government initiatives to local authorities initiatives. You know, we've just had the big three water, and then we're going to talk about water security, and then we're mixing infrastructure with environmental issues and imperatives and stuff like that. From the general public point of view, it's just another water thing that sits on the paper. But if this is very clear, I think it would have far more chance of success than if it's got this general aspirational label. Braces everything to do with water.
Chair, I understand the marketing and communications team have been doing some work around the packaging of the totality of our community engagement around freshwater, and in the next couple of weeks there will be a presentation coming to the Regional Planning Committee in particular, through to Council, on our freshwater plan change process from here, which will involve an extensive amount of community engagement over the next couple of years. So can I suggest that we come back to you with an overall game plan that has all of these strands mapped and how we're going to sequence the different engagements, because I absolutely agree with Dr. Marker that we do run the risk of confusing everybody about these multiple issues, multiple engagements occurring simultaneously.
Kia ora, thank you, Dr.
If I
Marker.
can just make one addendum to that, because it's something, the hobby horse of mine, and that is the education of the general public about water. And the Chairman just said his opening remarks about what people don't know, and it is incredibly confusing out there. And I think every local authority has an onus to help educate the informed people, or inform people and educate them in this field, so we can have a more intelligent debate about water rather than a polarised debate that we tend to get at the moment.
Fantastic. Councillor Van Beek, would you like?
Yeah, so what's been proposed here, does that mean that, because the regional water assessment has got 3 phases to it, what's been proposed now is actually really only phase 2 that will be covered?
So phase 1's well underway, and phase 2 is really about developing the scope for some some further investigation. So there's nothing about the creation of panel, even if it takes some time to come together, that slows or stops that work. That can still be progressed, because the real heavy lifting of the panel is really about shaping the range of policy interventions that need to be looked at and be cited on the brief. So, if your question is this going to slow that down or be an impediment to it, the paper does talk about I suppose the amount of focus that the panel would have in each of those areas, and it really the heavy lifting comes towards the back end of the process.
Fantastic. Last question. I'm just mindful of time.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to ask this question. You're looking to progress a particular option here today, I take, but I'm concerned, one, that, as I mentioned earlier, the structure has yet to be reworked, and thanks to my colleague, Councillor Williams, I'll also reference the communications plan, which, for example, has the 3D work in it. So this tells me if we adopt and accept this recommendation and its associated comms plan, we would have that panel proceeding to also include the 3D stuff as a part of their consideration, whereas as my thinking is it's actually not. It's part of the information set that feeds into it, but we're not asking it to either proceed or not proceed with that particular project. That's already a done deal. So will therefore both the configuration of the structure and the associated comms plan be recrafted to reflect this approach? And my second question goes back to the Tanga Whenua representation on it. And I'm wondering, in fact, we ought to go to multiple panels, that we do have a Ruataniwha and a Hiratonga panel, given the, and I mean, from north to south, we've got unique propositions in each area. So I'm concerned that 6 to 8 panel configuration, including 50% tangata whenua, from different parts of the rohe, creates exactly the scenario that we had with Tank, or have experienced with Tank. So can you help me with both of those two elements of this?
So thanks, Councillor. So I'll try and go in reverse, and hopefully that will help answer your first question. The focus absolutely here is on this panel, is on the regional water assessment on that project, and hence that's why we're proposing a regional panel as opposed to, because, you know, and we get the feedback a lot from Wairoa, you know, where's Wairoa in this? And, you know, it just seems to be like a CHB Hiratonga issue. And I think that global, all of region perspective on the regional water assessment is really important, because, you know, in some respects, what is a challenge in some areas of the region is potentially an opportunity in other areas of the region, like Wairoa, who are, you know, relatively, you know, water secure.
Don't you see the problem of a gridlock like we do have time to time in the RPC, for example, when we have that configuration in play? It is a balance between the regional approach you're talking about, but the if you like, the practicalities of dealing with that on the ground.
Yeah, again, and I think and it was perhaps a little bit in your first in the first part of your question, in terms of, you know, could this panel, you know, kill the 3D aquifer mapping project? Well, this panel is not designed to be a decision-making panel, and we're not asking this table to delegate delegate that. The comms plan that you've got there was the strategic comms plan for the entire project. It was developed, and it was presented in a workshop to you, but I think we ran out of time and didn't have a chance to get right into it. So the specific communications and engagement piece for one of the projects within the plan, which is the regional water assessment, is a piece of work that we're working on, but a little bit dependent on the outcome of today's discussion in terms of which way you want to go.
So the comms plan proposed won't be this comms plan?
No, so this is the strategic. That is very much a high-level picture of the entire body of work that forms part of the security program.
Councillor Foss.
Thanks. Just a
Last
quick
question.
one. Regardless of what option, but particularly option 3, that your preferred option, I think there needs to be quite a bit more depth on the appointment process, the accountability, the transparency, the governance, reporting requirements, etc. It's kind of touched on up top, but some of the options are taking us down that route very quickly without having that kind of information. And so how can we fulfil that gap?
So I think we've prepared a draft terms of reference. You know, that it just wasn't appropriate, I think, to put it in front of the here today. We're really asking for your direction in that, in terms of the recommendations, in terms of to what extent do you want to delegate, some of these decisions to a panel, or to what extent do you want to, green light the concept, in which case we will bring that information back to you around the governance. And we've put some draft criteria for panel membership up. We've made some recommendations around the constitution of the panel, but look, it is absolutely our intention to get your direction and guidance
I
on
understand
that.
that the key is absolutely the terms of reference under which any of these options operate.
Mhm.
And so the options actually are asking of our direction to tick this off without having that further definition. And yes, I guess at another committee we'll see that, but it's only half the story. So I just let that rest on the table, because I'm not quite comfortable in going down the route without actually understanding the parameters under which these groups may operate.
Okay, thank you. I think we have Manuhiri coming at 10 o'clock to present, so we're going to have to move along with this item. But I do feel that everyone feels the importance of this discussion. But the recommendations we have on the paper here include one, and we're seeking the movement. So, Councillor Martin Williams.
Thank you,
Excuse me.
Madam Chair. I'd like.
I asked before if there'd be an opportunity for me to put an alternative proposal on the table. You said after questions.
Mm-hmm.
So if
We'll
Councillor
hear the
Williams-
recommendations first. We'll go through the recommendations, and if they don't go through.
If I could move, well, no, that could be I would like to move 2.1, 2.2.3, and 2.2.3.5. Whereby we obviously agree that it's not significant, etc., and we go for the community panel with the makeup of that panel recommended to us by the Chief Executive Chair and EICC Chair. Bearing in mind that this is a recommendation of this committee, we can revisit this as the full council, but I'm moving that is the recommendation that this committee make. And that would also enable some time for the establishment of the terms of reference before we make any decisions on panel makeup.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
I'll second it pro forma, but I'd be interested to hear from, no, I won't second it yet, I'd be interested to have an alternative.
Okay.
Councillor Barker.
Councillor Barker.
Well, I think we should have a discussion before we move to a decision making, because Rex has raised an issue which I'm really fundamentally about, is are we going to be decision makers here as elected councillors, or are we going to delegate? That's the fundamental thing. And what's this proposal here is to delegate. And yes, it is to the panel to go and do the work. And my experience of this is not that good. I think personally we should, this council should run this work. It can engage whatever it wishes to in terms of expertise, like James has put forward before. I say because I'm really concerned about the time this process will take. That's what worries me the most. The more moving parts you have, the more things you're likely to break down, and that worries me really greatly. I think we could, most of the expertise, knowledge is in this building. They could report to council. The council could then do a draft of what it saw and hold community workshops across the region, Central Hawke's Bay, etc., iwi, etc., say this is what we're thinking. Engage in the planning sessions. In the light of that view coming back to us, then refine our program, put it out there, invite submissions at that term, then settle on it and get on with it. My view is that these will take far too long, this process here, and we'll lose control of it. I'm very nervous about this. I just think the issues about water are so pressing, we need to be sure that we're going to be able to get this thing done. And I think the issues of having the council be seen to be having complete ownership of this are less of a concern than the interminable delays will come with a long, convoluted process. That's my view.
So,
Point of order, I'm wondering if we're debating my motion or putting an alternative to it. I do sense that Councillor Barker's concerns could be addressed in debating the motion that I have put.
so
I'm putting
we'll
an
go.
alternative to it.
Yep.
I didn't hear what it was.
So we'll go back to the motion. Was there a seconder to the motion?
Well, I have some sympathy for Councillor Barker's position, and I'm wanting to progress it, but I don't know whether we've canvassed an alternative proposal. I don't know what it looks like, Councillor Barker. I'd be interested to see the wording.
Well, why don't we take the meeting at 10, I'll write some notes and put it up on the table, but I can't do that whilst Councillor
Yes.
Williams' motion's on the table.
So do we have a seconder to the motion? Because we need to follow along from the mover.
Repeat which options you're doing again, 2 point?
Well,
It's option
bearing in
3.
mind that this is a panel that recommends to the council for its decision making, I'm suggesting 2.2.3, well obviously 2.1, but 2.2.3 and 2.2.3.5.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Okay. Would you like to briefly speak?
I think if we've got Manahiri here, then perhaps we could defer until we come back, and there may be an opportunity for some offline discussion between me and Councillor Barker, who knows?
Well, I think we will have to defer this
Yes.
because I feel there are too many differing views on this, and it seems like we can work to a middle ground, but not quite here in this time.
Although, to be clear, I would like to speak to this today, this meeting.
Okay, so if we can defer this item actually to before minor items, okay, because we have other presentations all day, so it would become item 14 just before minor items.
Defer this till later in the day.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Okay. Do we need a motion to defer? No, that's it. Okay. Here we go. No, I think we'll
I don't think anyone's had a chance to actually advocate and
Yeah,
explain.
So if we can please have item 11, so Martina to come and present about Te Karamu, and then following that we have the Karamu Enhancement Group Deputation, following that the Haumoana Ecology Group Deputation and the Forest and Bird presentation.
Excellent, thank you, Chair. So I'll just introduce Martina Groves. She's our Manager Regional Assets, and Russ, who's our Team Leader for Open Spaces. So as many of you know, Russ has been off work for a while. It's great to see he's back.
Good to see you back.
3 half days a week.
Thank you.
So we're supporting Russ's return to full work.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So great to see you here, Russ. Look, this was really just to give a brief update on the progress of Te Karamu over the last year, because I know there's been a number of questions from councillors, so it was a good opportunity to give a brief update of where things are at. The context is, as part of producing our first asset management plan for open spaces, we have reviewed the Te Karamu plan, and it needs a little bit more work, and our view is that we would bring that back for some further oversight, probably at the November meeting, but potentially early in the new year. So the intent is a brief update with a more comprehensive briefing to come as a result of our review. So I will hand you over to Martina.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So this is just to update you as what we have been doing on the Karamu stream for last 2-3 years, more detail on the last year planting, so everyone is aware of the progress and that we do have a strategic plan in place, and that plan is being currently reviewed for next 5 years, so we kind of have a better understanding of where we're going, what we're doing. So the Karamu enhancement been going on for many years. It started in 1970s, and in 2004 we had a bit of strategic plan, and that was more implemented with with 2016 implementation plan, where we split the Karamu enhancement work into 7 zones, and we plan those 7 zones for next 10 years, for until the 2025. So I like Russ to kind of update us a little bit more as what we were doing for last year. So that's the financial year 1920, because he was actively involved in that work. So are you okay?
I'm okay.
On that?
Thank you. Good
Welcome
morning,
back,
councillors.
Welcome back.
Thank you for all the support and the messages that I received. I really do appreciate that. And colleagues at the back from the Karamu Enhancement Group, I think they're being heard next. Yes, 2019-20 certainly was an interesting year. We can all relate. We do our winter planting, obviously, in winter, and so that COVID had a massive impact on the actual delivery of the project. And in most cases, we make use of community groups, iwi school groups, Duke of Edinburgh groups, the William Pike school groups, businesses, etc., to do the actual physical planting, and it's a great win for us to have volunteer labour. But that said, it takes a lot of work to get to that stage. To be honest, the actual planting is the easy bit. The preparation work of fencing, spraying, all the negotiating and MOUs in some cases takes a fair bit of effort and planning. And so we work through the Te Karamu enhancement strategy as best we can, but we also pick up the easy wins when approached by, say, a neighbouring farmer saying, we want to work with you, we want to enhance our area. It's within the planting zone, and we go, awesome, that's fantastic, good reputational input as well. So working with our neighbours and with the community is obviously a council objective. So in the last financial year, the main focus has been in the Havelock North Pukahu area. Those who know where St George's Road meets Tiaudi Road. There's a bridge over the Karamu stream, and we work actively with Forest and Bird and with Bostocks, 2 separate planting sites. Bostocks have developed almost a bit of a maze environment with native planting, and they're progressively adding to that, along with some of the neighbours down St George's Road who've been really proactive and seen a fair chunk of the interface between their farms and the stream planted up in native bush. So Pukahu, we had a planting of about 1,500 square metres with the Forest and Bird group, acknowledging Lady Linda Johnson, who's headed up that group for some time and is now moving up to Rotorua to be with family in the next number of seasons. She's been outstanding to work with. The nature of working with the community group, it's not contracting. It's not giving an instruction and saying go to it. There's a lot more involved in just relationship building, working with the specific needs of that group. They all come with a different shape and form and requirement. Some are proactive, some need a bit of hand-holding in the process. So give credit to my team who have good people skills, and they're able to meet that need as required. At times we have to push back. One of the groups likes to go out for update cleaning of the leaves to improve the stomata behaviour of the native tree so it can respond in a better manner. And to be honest, we don't have time for that. It's not realistic. And so we entertain some of this and encourage them to go to it, but we can't. We basically have 0.6 of an FTE that is involved with the entire Te Karamu strategy. So that's a lot of community groups, schools, iwi, etc., to facilitate this work with, as well as the Karamu Enhancement Group at the back there. So, yes. Update as well, we've done some planting in Haumoana Historical Park on the rerouted Karamu stream that goes around the new park. Rex and Rick have done some amazing planting there of late. And we're working with the Whakatū community group, Ko Pariki, and further enhance the planting that's both sides of the stream. We're realistic all the time. We've got 238 lineal kilometres of Karamu, including the catchment, the various streams like the Karata Whenua, the Heri Heri, the Mangatere, etc. And so that's a lot of waterway. You could double that if you're saying they're both sides to a stream, 500 odd lineal kilometres of stream. The catchment is about 51,000 square kilometres. So yeah, it's a very large project. We're touching many thousands of people in Hawke's Bay with our 0.6 FTE. So that's just the reality of where we're at. But at the same time, the good news is that we are 77% of the way through the delivery of the strategy that is there from 2016 to 2025. So current where we're at right now, 2020, we can hand on heart say what we said we would do. We are now 77% complete of that 10-year period. That said, we're looking at the original strategy, seeing where we've made tweaks to it, and where community groups have requested more than the original strategy paper document described. And so it's just a bit of a check and balance. Where we at? Where do we plan to be? How do we get there? And I guess that will be coming to you in the LTP.
Yeah, so we are kind of refining that plan a little bit and looking what was planned, what is the budget allowing us, what is the demand, and try to kind of synchronize all that within the existing budget we currently have for the Karamu enhancement work. So this piece of work is going to be presented to council again by end of this calendar year, by December, where we're going to have a very clear vision as to what we're doing with this piece of work for next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to see you back here, Russ.
Thank you.
Hapai. If we can just have short questions, because we've got the next presentation to come. Rex.
Thank you, Martina and Russell. So it's obviously it's a vast job, the Karamu, because there's all the little waterways going in, such as the Awaha, which run through my property. And I just wonder, and I've put this on the table before, whether we can't ask the landowners who have a stream running through their property to plant it. Because to me it's their responsibility. And I look at all the creeks and things that run through properties which just, been grazed right up or orcharded right up, and I just think it's just not right that if you own the land and you own the land up to the stream, you should have the responsibility of planting it. Is there any way that we can encourage landowners in the first instance, but within a decade they'll probably be forced to do it, but is there any way that we can actually have because if landowners embraced it, they'll do it. Like Johnny Bostock, and you mentioned him, he's embraced this and he's out there doing it, and I've done my little bit of the Awaha. So I think other landowners would do it. Could we have a program so that they do it so we don't?
Correct.
Yeah, no, go.
Yes, through the chair. I really do appreciate what you're saying there, Rex. It's a great initiative, and I think that's part of looking at the strategy now, just reviewing it and saying, is there any... We've been in this now for four and a bit years. Is there a way of doing this smarter, better, easier, and absolutely working with people is the solution. We can't do it on our own, and we totally dependent on our people.
And just to add, Russ, I think there's opportunity moving forward to look more aggressively at leveraging other Crown funding or other funding sources. So at the moment, this is being funded primarily through a targeted rate, and I think we can create some space within the team to pursue other funding to, double or triple the effort put in. So that's something we'll be looking at certainly going forward.
And also to help with kind of letting the landowners to plan is that we are thinking to provide kind of like a guideline where it's going to be very easily picked up, and so it's going to be easy for them to understand as what is it we need if the planting occurs. And that's part of the plan change. We actually have to provide this kind of guide, not just for the Karamu, but for other streams as well. So that's another piece of work kind of aligned with this.
Thank you. Councillor Foss, then Councillor
Thanks.
Curtin.
I just put my hand up to be involved in that review that you're doing and some of the solutions that Rex and others have come up with just to deliver this, because it's fantastic, because that's what people expect us to be doing. They can see, touch it, feel it, and enjoy the benefit of it. Of the 77% where you're at into your 10-year plan, which is great, I just can't quite work out, that's 77% of what you targeted back in 2016. Of the 238 linear Ks of the larger Karamu, how much of it is that? How much is that planted up?
A very good question. So of that 238 linear kilometres, we're not planting all of it. And I think I had this discussion with you when we had a site visit, Craig. Actual planting, yeah. So basically only 8% of the entire Karamu, including the tributaries, is what we've identified as key node planting. And I wasn't involved in the setup of the strategy, but what's been identified with the science team is that birds and I guess fauna require key areas.
Yeah. So in the strategy in 2016-25, we identified we're going to be planting 9.4 hectares, and currently we are in 7.2 hectares we planted.
Yeah, I just mean that linear, the corridor, as people said, but the thanks, you've answered it. Just basically, in a perfect world, would be at 100%. In a perfect world, we probably wouldn't have taken them down in the first place.
Yes.
Just one further question, just what's the story in Twyford with these orchardists not playing the game here?
No.
Havelock and Irongate are doing the heavy lifting. Napier's doing very well, and Twyford are...
Rapui's not bad, mate.
No.
Is this a question our staff can actually answer?
Yes, it is.
Question to the general public, actually.
Oh, right.
As our eyes go to one of our councillors.
Councillor Curtin, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Look, I just want to go to your vision statement, in particular your paragraph 7. You're talking about a network of clean and healthy waterways. Sure, you've got to measure as to the amount of plantings that are done, but what measures are you making to tell us how healthy the waterways, how you're measuring waterways health, what is the sediment load reductions you're achieving?
According to Wikipedia, measurement is...
Thank you. Thanks for the answer.
Does that ever happen in court?
Alexa?
You're dismissed.
He does it every time.
I don't know. Only when you're speaking.
You lost your train of thought now.
Well, the question is around measuring performance, ecosystem performance. Whatever.
No, you're good.
Okay, through the chair. So a great question, Councillor Curtin.
I always have great questions.
So you're quite correct. I think up until now the measure has been purely land planted based, and that's a poor way of measuring the outcome. I'm really quite grateful to have a chap in our team now, Rod Dixon, who comes from a biodiversity background. He's nationally recognised in that space. So we need to adjust our thinking and say, actually, how is this impacting the fauna and flora? How is the pest management, animal and plant, looking now as it used to back in the day? And water quality, absolutely yes. There's obviously a government initiative to have our stream swimmable within a generation. I'm have a bit of a, I'm involved with the rowing club and the kayak club in Clive, and so obviously I want to see that water as swimmable and clean as it possibly can be. So a vested interest in that space as well. We're not doing those measurements ourselves, but we do have the science team doing the weekly checks and balances. So that information will be easy enough to gather and report back on in time. But you've raised a great question, and we do need to adjust the way we report our progress. Quite right.
I'll move.
Yes, for that, one last question
Okay.
before we move.
Just on the Karamu, are you also making sure that, I've been on the Karamu, and we have the same issues in Twyford, where plantings at times are done by the community and it actually takes away public access. So the Karamu itself actually has got a beautiful, in a way, open space where we can have walkways and cycleways from all the way from St George's to Havelock North and even further down to Riversley. Are you in that space as well, that you control that in future we actually will actually have public access to actually enjoy that beautiful space that's being created right now?
Yeah.
So that's been addressed. I don't manage the scheme, that's a colleague, so absolutely it needs to be considered. Primary function is getting water away so we don't flood our cities and towns, obviously. So working in with our colleagues so we don't plant areas heavily and then, remove that primary objective. There are different ways, and again, working in with the science team, the best practice way of planting an active stream, come berm, come stop bank, and I think probably the best practice that I've seen done here and in other regions is what you would see Bostock rolling out at the moment, just downstream from the St George's Bridge, where there's planting immediately adjacent to the active channel. Then there's probably a 5 metre wide stretch of grass, which we've had grazed, sheep grazing, and then there's more planting. So you've got that biodiversity, you've got space for future connections, walking, cycling, etc. And we do have a plan to long-term hook up Havelock North up to Bridge Bar for the wineries ride, so thinking long-term. And bringing the different uses and requirements into that limited space in what is actively, realistically a drain. So,
Yeah, I just would like to kind of make quite important that the Karamu and any other drain is there for taking the stormwater away or rainwater. So we, when we do planting, we do have to check is there capacity. So we really don't want to plant in the slope of the drain for two reasons. One is the restriction of the capacity of the drain, and the second one is that when the plants grow and the root system basically causing erosion and slippage, and that's actually been quite a significant problem lately, because we start planting and we put those plants in the stream and then they collapse and basically block the flow of the water, which normally would go down, but that's the issue. So we absolutely are very keen on enhancement of the drainage, but we also have to keep in mind that the waterways are there to take the stormwater first and foremost, and then enhance the water quality with the planting is the secondary.
Yeah. Well, we have a mover to receive the report, and if Councillor Bark you'd like to second, then you can speak to it.
Sure.
Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, firstly, to both of you, doing a fantastic job. Obviously, the Karamu is very close to my heart personally, and over the few years really, we've seen a huge change, and a lot of it's down to you. And just creating the corridors, on a personal note, I've been on my property for 33 years, and 3 weeks ago we saw a Karamu for the first time. And I've never seen a Karamu on the actual plains. You know, you have to go a little way up the hill to only as far as Iona. But, so we're definitely getting a lot more bird life, and there's no doubt about that. I would like to just end on my hobby horse, and that is I think that landowners, some landowners are really picking up the cudgel. The ones in Twyford, I have to say, are picking up the cudgel, despite my colleague to my left little comment.
I'm to your right, mate.
And the certainly the Bostock Group have definitely putting a lot of energy and capital into it, which is just great. And I hope that's an example to other landowners, because I do think that if you have a creek or a waterway running through your property, you have a responsibility to that waterway. And I think more people have got to start thinking that because not everyone does. And as a matter of fact, not more than 50% are. So we've got to start getting people to understand their responsibility as a landowner to the waterways.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you. I echo Councillor Graham's sentiment. I think that what the work you're doing is fantastic. I just want to see more of it and faster. But I have another pet hobby horse. Councillor Graham has his, I have mine. And mine is that the waterway of the Karamu is adversely affected by several things. Firstly, the nutriments are in it, and secondly, that there's no shade. And the sun heats up the water, and the combination of increased heat in the water and the nutriments means we'll get weed. What I am not yet seeing is a sign of the trees being planted to shade the Karamu. The river was never stripped back with nice grassy strips on either side of it. That's not how it naturally was. It's not how the fish live in it. Rivers and creeks used to have big shady pools, and fish used to live in this cool shady water. We've got, I think, a tension here between what the engineers want, which is the riverbanks all stripped away so the flow can go, and the environmental issues. And I want to see the environmental issues take a precedent over some of the engineering issues. So where can we look forward to a plan which sets out a planting regime which will see the Karamu once again shaded as it was, as it always should be, and into the future? So I look forward to that, a planting plan that does that. I'm doing my own little bit with Councillor Graham to help in that regard, but we've got a bit more to go.
Thank you, Councillor
It's 300
Barker.
years to wait.
All right, so I'll put it to the floor. All those who agree to receive the report, say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Kia ora. Thank you. Can I please invite the Karamu Enhancement Group to come up and present to us? I'm up the front, yep.
How are you?
Yeah, good.
Hey guys.
Oh, okay. Kia ora and welcome to the committee. Thank you for coming along. We have about 10 minutes for the presentation and question time. Does that sound sufficient?
Half an hour. No. Sorry, no.
That's okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity of being here this morning and making a short presentation. Listening to Russell speaking, it's obvious that the Karamu is of significance in terms of the council work, and it's very good to see that progress is being made overall. We recognise that our approach to the small section of the Karamu Parks Reach is probably insignificant as far as the overall picture is concerned, but it's still very important to us, and we do appreciate the opportunity of presenting a case for a more concentrated approach to Parks Reach. Parks Reach is that section of the Karamu stream between the Havelock Road Bridge and the Crosses Road Bridge. Recent residential development means that the true right bank is bordered for the whole length by Mary Doyle villas and other private housing. Behind the embankment, the left bank is bordered by a commercial shop open space and private residence. In the years 1997 to 2000, the true right bank between the two bridges was cleared, graded and grassed by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. The adjacent embankment was planted in native trees and shrubs by the St Columba's Havelock North Environmental Group, SNEG. That SNEG was coined by the council at the time because there was a lot of communication between that group and the council. This work and later planting by the council created an attractive walking area and bird sanctuary, which has become very popular with Havelock North residents. In 2012, a similar development on the true left bank by the council included the construction of a limestone walking and cycling track. Following the original development, its maintenance has been the responsibility of the council, originally with assistance from the Karamu Enhancement Group, which looked after the young trees and shrubs for several years, after which it went into recess. KEG restarted in 2018 with the aim of getting the maintenance improved. However, the lack of a planned approach with clear objectives has resulted in protracted discussion between KEG and the council, with issues being dealt with on an ad hoc basis. The area itself, on the right embankment, while much of the original native planting has thrived, a significantly increased the bird population of the area, there's been also significant deterioration. Originally shaded by large walnut trees, compounding early losses of the young plants. Also competition by weeds, including blackberry, hemlock and convolvulus. The removal of most of the walnut trees in 2016, leaving a number of open spaces which have reverted to long grass and weeds. Insufficient general maintenance. For example, on occasions, grass on the right bank was allowed to grow to such a height that it made it difficult and dangerous for walking, both before and after cutting. Recent advice is that the number of cuts will be increased by 2 per year. Similarly, long grass and weeds have been allowed to obscure various seats which were donated at the time of planting. Dead trees and shrubs have been allowed to remain for extended periods of time. After heavy rain or flooding, ponding has remained for extended periods in certain areas on the grassed areas between the native planting on the right embankment and the stream itself. The inability of water to re-enter the stream appears to be the result of inappropriate grade and planting along the edge of the stream. This ponding restricts the maintenance and hence walking on the right bank. An unrelated incident resulting from water leaking from the Mary Doyle reticulation system has since been rectified. In the last few weeks, a number of trees have been removed from a section of the planting on the right embankment, providing an enhanced view of the stream itself for a number of Mary Doyle properties. However, if this area is to look attractive and be fire safe, the extent of this opening up will require mowing or other means of grass and weed control. Notwithstanding the above, the interest and the cooperation of the Hawke's Bay, of the Regional Council staff responsible for the working in this area is acknowledged with appreciation. Recent advice of an increase in resource allocation is also welcome. The residential development mentioned above has created increased use of the area and awareness of the above deficiencies. A number of residents have spent considerable time maintaining areas of the planting. But I'm sure you would recognise that the residents of a retirement village have a limited capacity to do that work. It is recognised that Parks Reach is of small significance within the wider activities of the council, and that's obvious from what Russell was talking about before. It is significant to the people of Havelock North, who pay dedicated rates of approximately $140,000 per annum towards the maintenance and enhancement. This significance is particularly so for those who walk the area regularly and those who live right next door. In this context, the opening section of the Council's mission statement is particularly relevant, enhancing our environment together. The following submission, which if adopted would make for a clear understanding between all parties, is made on behalf of KEG, the Mary Doyle Retirement Complex and SNEG and other local residents. It is respectfully submitted that the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, in consultation with the above submitters, places greater emphasis on the ongoing maintenance and future development of Parks Reach. It is suggested that such emphasis would be best achieved by the development of a management plan for the area, together with appropriate budget provision. And that obviously that would fit in with, obviously fit as part of the overall plan which Russell was talking about earlier. Thank you very much for listening to us, and we're quite happy to answer any questions.
Got it. Thank you, John, and thank you to the Parks Reach group that's here and the supporters. So yeah, we'd like to open up the floor and ask questions. Yeah.
Thanks very much, John, for the submission, and to everyone that's been working with you, the various groups. Just the the way you've articulated it are you really asking for something different or just more engagement of what's another parallel universe? Because listening to Russell, there's a lot of things going on and around the larger Karamu. And can we, as well as this submission, perhaps communicate or engage better? Is that a thought to get better ownership of the various parts of the Karamu to potentially fulfil some of the things? Because you mentioned management plan and understanding what everyone's doing, because you've got these willing volunteers looking to work, but you want to do it in conjunction with the aspirations of the council.
Yes, I think it's a way of having a clear understanding of what is expected of the various parties, and I don't think that exists at the moment. And the understanding the expectations of Mary Doyle, for example, which right next door, is probably a bit different from what it is for Bostocks out in the country. And it's also recognised that that your council's responsibilities are more of a rural nature, and this happens to be a section of the stream which is actually in an urban context, and the expectations are a little bit different. I think they needs to be sorted out as to what is realistic. We're not necessarily asking for more, but perhaps to be a bit better organised and let know what I do. I think in terms of the significance of it, just recently in the Hawke's Bay today, there was a piece justifying the resolution, the nomination for Hastings as being the most beautiful big town in the country, and included that was a photograph of Parks Reach, and that I think was significant in terms of the importance of it.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Councillor Foss, I can probably add, because a lot of this is around probably budget and expectations, and so there is a targeted rate that this year I think the income for that Te Karamu project is around 234,000. Last year we spent 300,000 in total on Te Karamu, and we spent 10% or 30,000 in this particular parks reach. So what we need to balance for the whole Te Karamu strategy is our planting and other activities across the whole of the Karamu. And last year, 10% of that effort went into this particular location. So there's obviously some tension around how much we can invest in this area and how much we can invest in other areas. And that's just something we need to work through and make everyone aware of the current levels of expenditure and what that would mean if we expanded that level of expenditure or that level of service across the greater Karamu area. You know, we'd sort of be in the millions operating.
Sure.
You know, the Karamu is a regional park.
You're getting
type
proven
concept.
results in this particular area from people wanting, putting their hands up, so that's a huge plus.
Absolutely, yeah.
Councillor Curtin.
Yeah, thank you, and great to see you here, and admire the efforts that are put in on behalf of your community in that area. In this particular instance, we've got a targeted rate in play. Do you think payers in your community would be quite prepared to pay an increase in their targeted rate to keep enhancing the zone? What do you think the appetite is for a rate increase?
Obviously, people don't want to pay more if they can help it, but I think if they saw the place being looked after really well, that they would agree to that. I can't speak for everybody, obviously, and but I know that you know, the people in Mary Doyle, and that's why I actually live in Mary Doyle right next to it now. So there's they really appreciate that area. Whether Arvida would be prepared to pay extra rates, I'm not quite sure.
Am I able to speak?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, just the work that was done last year, my understanding is that it was quite major drainage work on the left bank, and that was a one-off. That is not sort of the same as the general maintenance of the whole stream. And I guess we've been a bit frustrated with the budget constraints with these weeds growing up to this high and amongst trees. And for 18 months we've been trying to get something. It needs just something that we can measure against and say, well, okay, this is what we want. We want to keep it as a jewel in the crown of Havelock North, if you like, because it is right next to the town. Yeah. It's quite special.
Absolutely. Any other question? Councillor
Thank you.
Williams.
Look, again, thank you and acknowledgement to John and your team who've come here today. My question's actually for the staff who are currently engaged in a conversation, so I'll just wait for a minute. Sorry, I'm going back to a conversation we had, I'm not sure which workshop or meeting it was, but it was about the asset management group having a more deliberate and structured management plan framework linked to our objectives as a council, one of which is biodiversity. The deputation asks for a clearer understanding between the parties as to respective responsibilities. I'm assuming this is regional council land and a regional council asset and possibly a reserve. Would the management plan structure linked to our biodiversity recreation objectives be a home in which that greater clarity of role and budget purpose could be developed?
Yeah, so certainly I think we would feel that our Te Karamu strategy is the management plan. I guess we need to look at how we can most efficiently and effectively use the budget on the ground, and I think developing management plans for various locations is quite a significant overhead. So I would probably like to see the Te Karamu strategy as the operational plan, and I think we'll take it on board. There can be greater clarity between the expectation of what community groups do and what we do, but I think there will also remain a gap between the expectations of some community and what we're actually able to achieve within the budget. But that just comes down to money and how it's allocated. So we can have a further discussion around that. I think in terms of this LTP, we are not planning to ask for any additional funding for Te Karamu. but we are planning to review the plan so we can more effectively use the money we have, and we have I guess a number of more urgent and greater challenges that we're currently looking to fund, just acknowledging the current sort of financial environment that we're in, and we'll come to you at the workshop, I think next week, to talk about some of those.
Fantastic. Well, for
one of the
time.
difficulties I've had in terms of leading up to this is, in fact, finding out what money is spent there. I haven't been able to do it. I mean, I've been dealing with staff, obviously, but I haven't been able to find out what actually is spent there.
So look, that is certainly in terms of our asset management system that we're wanting to invest in. It will be really easy to report that. At the moment, staff are required to go through reams and reams of paper to determine exactly what was spent in each location. And certainly from an asset management point of view, what we do is we give each asset a functional location, and we record the purchase order against the functional location, and we can run a report out of the system about how much money we've spent on every asset. So that is our vision going forward. We certainly aren't in that space today, and part of the challenge is, if I ask Russ how much did we spend there, his staff have to go through the whole finance system, spreadsheets of invoices, literally thousands of invoices, to pick the correct ones out. So we can report at a Te Karamu level quite easily, but at each location there's a bit more challenge.
Okay.
I'll move.
So we have a mover and a seconder to receive your presentation. We'll put it to the floor. Those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against?
Have a little speech.
Yes, you can. My apologies. Another one. One more speech.
Another one. Oh, that's a bit of a word. Well, thank you, John, and your team. Really appreciate the work that you guys put in there, and the concern especially. I walk that piece of river regularly, and certainly see it every time I take my kids to school on either side of the bridge. And I must say that despite the, we have the trials, we don't get it perfect all the time because there is a budget, but it is amazing what the change has occurred there in the last decade. It is absolutely amazing. From the early days, and it's not even a decade ago, it must be 6 years ago, when I went to meetings at Mary Doral with Anthony Rucastle, when we did the walnut trees, and it was just a barren area really, except the walnut trees. So now it has really, every year I'm amazed how good it becomes. So maybe some little issues, but 1,000 times better than it was a decade ago. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Chair.
Oh, we have one more other speaker who would like to acknowledge you.
Thanks, I do actually, but also I'll just pick up, and I'd really much like to meet with you to help you, your engagement with the council, and explore at least some of this non-financial stuff to help everyone have clarity about what's expected of them. I think that's a really wise question. So thank you, Chair. I do second it, that I offer that to you to have a meeting to try and work through that.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Kia ora. Now we're on to item 13, the Haumoana Ecology Group. If you'd like to come up the front. And do we have an electronic presentation that you're going to present? Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Thank you. No, shocker. I know. But everyone's already had a go. I know. I intentionally did that one. I thought hopefully no one would say.
The first one's more but you and I need to step outside and talk about what the resolution is. Yeah. Turns on 2 points. And control. If I'm not too long to speak to you, I will do. I'll take that on. Yeah. Heavyweight for both of you. Provoking. No, she said.
Chair, are we able to grab a cup of tea and bring
No,
it?
not yet.
No.
This is all your fault.
Talk to the union.
1, 2.
Yeah, that's a fraction of the talks.
No, not at all. I had a certain thing.
Right, we'll wait for all the deputations and then you can have a cup
Be
of
rude
tea.
to our
I was
guests.
going to say, you reported the Department of Labour for breaching our standards.
No, it'd be absolutely
Honour our
rude to our
manuhiri
guests
and
to
then you
do
can have
that.
a cup of tea.
You want to sit in this one? No, can't have that.
No, it's not due to 11 o'clock anyway.
Exactly. Keep them in the control, Madam
Yes.
Chair. Please do. They've been doing it for years.
I know.
Been doing it all day, Ref.
I waited for that one. Did it all day.
Control, that's what they did.
Control.
Right. Oh, this looks great. Oh, kia ora and welcome. Thank you. I have Liz, but who else do we have here?
We have Mike Harris
Kia ora, Mike.
and Marilyn Barnash.
Kia ora, Mike.
Kia ora.
Fantastic. So we've got about 10 minutes as well and time for questions at the end, so please.
We'll keep it really brief because
Fantastic.
we've put it in the submission on what we want to say, but tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. And thank you. We just a very new community group, and it was my idea that we just come and form a relationship with the council, recognise what you're doing and what we're doing, and very keen on working in partnership. And we have already had a couple of meetings with Beau Farnley from the council, who's been really helpful in setting up our group. We just really began because we were concerned with what was happening in the wetlands and the lagoons, and with predators and so on coming into play. And also we wanted to do some planting there and to educate ourselves and the public about the bird life, and just really, we really love our environment out in Haumoana. It's very, very special. And so it was very, very easy to set up a meeting very quickly. We just put something on a Facebook page, and the next day there was literally 12 people who came to the cafe to talk about what we want to do. So, and I think we've had about 8 meetings since then, and there's a Facebook page. I think it's up to 200 people on it now, isn't it? Yeah. So we've you've got the information there, but we've already had a planting day, and with great support from the community, people very, very happy to see what's happening. And we've got another one planned soon, and we're also working closely with other groups, including Hastings District Council, and we'd love to have all of our organisations working closely together. And we've also met with Bernie Kelly from the Department of Conservation, with people from Tiawanga Downs and Mariah Totara Tree Trust, Biodiversity Hawke's Bay, Predator-Free Hawke's Bay, and the Environment Centre, and as well as our local community, Cape Coast Community Group, and with the school and WOW as well. So we've, made a point of liaising and communicating with other people, as well as we are going to meet with our local marae as well, and we have been consulting with local Māori on respecting the kaitiaki involved. Mike's going to say a little bit more about the wetlands and the problems with the wetlands that we've got, and Dr. Andy Hicks from the council has already been out and looked at that, and there's some of his report there. There is some local people who are doing quite a lot of work with traps and predator control, which of course is really, really important. And then there's the issue of protecting the erosion on the beach, and how important planting is with that, and the very difficult issue of controlling vehicles on the beach. It's a stony beach, but it can be an issue when there's nesting birds or young plants, and when you've got the community out planting, it's good if those plants can be protected. But it's a pretty sensitive area about vehicles, and going back for quite a long time. So we're treading carefully with that, but we kind of really believe that the importance of education, educating the public, and the more people care about our area, the more they'll want to protect it. So, and of course, litter is another issue, and how do we get people to make sure that they pick up their litter and don't leave it there, because there's quite a few visitors to our area. It's becoming very popular. There's a new cafe there now, which is fantastic. We've got the cycleways, of course. So it's just a matter of that ongoing issue, as you know, of helping people to treat our area with respect. So I've just got a few photographs from our planting day. It's one of the wetland areas.
If I just go slightly to the...
Make it bigger.
Oh, it's so sensitive. Just increase the size, everyone.
Thank you.
It's really sensitive, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Would it help to put this one? Like that one?
No, the next one along. The other direction.
And of course, a cup of tea helps when you're planting, doesn't it? We're right by the Tukituki River mouth, which is, and there's some of your signs. And we're also adjacent to the Waitangi Regional Park, which of course is wonderful. So anyway, that's us, and I'll hand over to Mike and Marilyn to say a few words.
Yeah, just briefly on the question of vehicles. We're very aware, those of us who've lived in Haumoana for a while, that people in that area value their freedoms. And one of those freedoms is being able to take four-wheel drives onto the beach. I think the only issue that we have is that the Shingle Bank crest is very much maintaining that it costs a lot of money. It's part of the coastal hazard strategy for 100 years, and it's meant to be maintained at about 4 meters. The problem with the four-wheel drive vehicles is that they invariably get stuck up there, they come off the back, and they come over the plantings and other things that we've done and existing plants. So that's a problem. People who access the beach on the seaward side, that would be a far more preferable practice. And we're hoping over time that with education and maybe some signage, that we'll be able to get some of those people on board and limit the damage and thereby limit erosion and risk of inundation, which is very much part of our future on the coast. Having said that, regarding lagoons, we do love our lagoons and wetlands and the estuary, but more specifically about the lagoons, and taking up on what Councillors Barker and Graham have said earlier, when we look at those lagoons, we're really looking up into the hills, where the water's coming from, and the sediment and a lot of unwanted chemicals and pollutants. And we'd like to think that we can work collaboratively with the councils and with landowners in time to convince them that it would be a good idea to put small detention dams in with plantings distal of that towards the sea, where there would be wetlands that can filter, small wetlands that can filter some of the pollutants out, and also some riparian planting. And we as a group would like to be part of that. We feel that that's something that we'd like to do, and hopefully some landowners will get on board with that and think it's a good idea. We're very grateful for the work Andy Hicks has put in, and Dave Paku. They've been very, very good to communicate with. And also Robbie Darby, who's on the Cape Coast Community Group and lives just down the road from us. We hope that we can all work together. But we also appreciate the council's view that they don't want too many people speaking to them about the same issues, So we're going to have to find a way to be respectful of that. But at the end of the day, what we're saying is that there's a bigger picture, and we think that collaboratively and with some passion we can go a long way over a period of time.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Fantastic presentation. Thank you both. Do we have any questions from our committee members? Yep. Councillor Foss.
Thanks very much. And again, thanks so much for what you do above and beyond. Can I just touch base, Mike, what you were saying at the end there, that point about there's many really good people out there, organisations doing similar things, and when they engage with the council, it's better to have one door to knock on than 10 or 10. But how do you have any ideas how to help facilitate that? Because there's a similar connection there to the previous group, and you're engaging with the council, the big, this big beast, and give suggestions of how that could be improved, perhaps, or any ideas in that space.
Can I just answer that? I think one of the big things, I've only just moved out to Haumoana, is that there's no communication. Like when I started asking around, nobody knew who to ask. And, we're doing the Facebook, isn't it, Liz? And that way we can share information.
Yeah.
And that's why when we started up, we actually had a meeting and invited all of those people that I've mentioned so that we could actually talk, so, we could all talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And because it's really important that as communities and as councils, that we just learn how to work together, and it's more effective for your money because we're prepared to get out and look after plants and do the stuff that the council can't possibly do.
That's right. That's a marriage made in heaven if we communicate.
Yeah, sure. So I think there are a couple of key issues here. One is our meeting with the trustees of Matahiwi Marae, because we really are interested in their interpretation of guardianship, kaitiaki-tanga. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing is that I'm sure we can sort out pretty easily a conversation with Cape Coast Community Group following those sort of other key meetings as to who's going to talk with the council and make it easier for the councils, because at the end of the day, the smoother the road is, the better, and the more is going to get done.
And can I also mention our own councillor, Councillor Jerif, who is often out at Haumoana and attending meetings with the various groups, as are the Hastings District Council councillors. So thank you for that, because you've been very encouraging and helpful. And that we have a newsletter. Well, Cape Coast Community Group, I should say, has a newsletter, and we put a little flyer into that newsletter. And we can definitely sort out ways to communicate better, even if it's just talking to each other, and especially regional council and HDC working together, because those the adjacent issues.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, I'm actually, thank you very much for you coming here today and telling us what you already have done in a very short period, and I'm really impressed by that, and also the thoughts that you have and some of the answers that we as a council grapple with, that hopefully you can contribute as well. And four-wheel drives, motorbikes and rubbish is one of those. Yeah, there's three main issues that we as a council have to come to grips with, because it seems to get worse, and it really polarises people within the community as well. But I must say that because of Liz, the work that you have done previous with here at the council, is that you've got a good understanding which phone numbers to ring, and when the meetings I've had there with David Paku and with Andy Hicks, they've been very positive, and I always hear from them they're open to being contacted, talked to. So I think you've really made a very good start, and as Councillor Foss did prior, I'll continue to put my hand up that if there is any issues, if I can help smooth the road to the great work that you do, then to be in contact and call me, and I'll do the best I can working with the staff without overburdening them. That's very important.
Fantastic. Councillor Curtin.
I was just going to move, Madam Chair.
Well, if there's no other questions.
You did.
You can.
Oh,
Who
I'm
would like to move
happy to remove the receipt of the report.
to receive the report? And second, and you'd like to speak to
Just
that?
very briefly, just to take this opportunity, Liz, to acknowledge that, acknowledge your role and your colleagues in this case. Liz has never stopped being an environmental activist, and this is just yet another example of that. And great to see you, Liz. I just hope that we can, in addition to the works group engagement you've had, is that there is strong connection to the catchment group, Ian, and that it's we're able to see where we might facilitate either riparian planting, the coastal work that we're doing, to make sure that you are tapping into the resources that we've applied to that particular zone. So congratulations, and the more groups such as yourselves that establish like this makes our job a heck of a lot easier.
And Sheriff, would you like to speak?
No.
No, I think. So to receive the report from the Haumoana Ecology Group, all those that agree say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against? Carried. Kia ora. Thank you. Right, now we have Forest and Bird Napier branch presentation. Thank you for waiting.
Yeah, right.
That's all right. They haven't had a cup of tea until you're done. So I've held them off. No cup of tea until all our presentations are done. Please come to the front. Mm-hmm. Leverage. It's called leverage.
I thought you would bang the table by now.
Won't hold that against them, though.
Good to see you, Liz.
Thank you.
I might get you, I wouldn't have a clue.
Oh, you just use the plug like that. Just use the little button to scroll up and down. But the screen is far in front.
Kia ora, David.
Kia ora.
Hei te pihea koe. We have 10 minutes. All yours.
All right. Don't think it'll be that long. Never mind. All right, so the chairman of the Environmental and Integrated Catchments Committee and the chief executive officer of Regional Council and the chairman of the Regional Council Board. I wish to write, and on behalf of the Napier branch of the Royal Forest and Bird Protection Society of New Zealand, in expressing our sincere thanks and appreciation for the support and the cooperation from the Biosecurity and the Biodiversity Division of HBRC in having Little Bush Reserve now completely protected with deer fencing. Secondly, and most importantly, our grateful thanks to your board for granting the financial support towards the completion of both Stage 1 last year and Stage 2 recently of this project. The fencing contractor has done a marvellous job with a high standard of workmanship, particularly with Stage 2 that presented massive obstructions which had to be cleared prior to fencing commencement. 5 men took 4 full days plus another day with a digger to clear a length of 700 metres. That's how overgrown the old existing fence line was. Well beyond the capabilities of our branch. Now that Little Bush Reserve is completely fenced to exclude deer intrusion and devastation, this enables our branch volunteers to better concentrate on other predator control, which again is extremely well supported by Biosecurity and Biodiversity Division departments. Yesterday, brand new trap on Stage 2, a Doc 200, a cat. We would happily welcome and accompany an inspection by your board and staff members if so desired. Again, our sincere thanks for fully supporting this worthy project for the preservation and the restoration of the biodiversity within the 11.5 hectare Little Bush Reserve. whilst I'm on my feet, we would also commend HBRC in expressing interest in the proposal of the purchase of the Whittle Reserve, which lies further to the west than Little Bush Reserve, and we wish to offer our support in the intended purchase of this property. I have here a few pictures just to remind you of our beauties that lie within Little Bush Reserve. On the left here, our giant hen elm, which is in the front entry paddock. Unfortunately, there's an old notice there, and that is due for replacement very shortly. And I have just included one or two beauty shots to express to you the beauties that we have within the reserve. On the right-hand picture is a massive tikoka, which I'm led to believe by Kay Griffiths of the Central Hawke's Bay Conservation Company could be one of the largest cabbage trees in the North Island. That was measured, I don't know whether this will tell me. No, sorry. Oops. We've jumbled around a wee bit. Those flowers there are on the giant hen owl tree. Our workmen planting in an area to the northern end, which some 5-6 years ago was covered in massive blackberry, which had intruded from the neighbouring farm property. We managed to spray it, and now we're replanting it. Some area probably the size of 2 or 3 tennis courts. Walking around the perimeter of our wonderful gem. Some wonderful trees. Back to the giant tikoka. I was asked to measure that at 1.35 metres from ground level, which I understand is the standard forestry means of recording measurement. And at 1.35 metres from ground level, around the butt measured 4.2 metres. Not bad for a tikoka. Some examples of our pest control. Stoats and a ferret. And I have on my phone, but not included here, as I said to you, a cat recorded yesterday in one of the newly set traps around stage 2 of the fence line. So that'll come up next time. That is an example of the fence line prior to our work commencement. Overgrown with blackberry, fallen trees, and now deer fencing. And more deer fencing. That's stage 1. That was the easy part because we had no massive work, and the bulk of that work we managed to clear ourselves. Some familiar faces. And on stage 1, particularly at this point, which is near perimeter trap 5, we've installed a pedestrian gate, so as if anybody is interested, they can perhaps visit the giant tikoka, which is hidden away. That is padlocked, and we have 3 or 4 keys to that padlock among the committee. So I think, thank you very much indeed for listening, and that's our presentation and appreciation of things.
Kia ora, David. It truly is a magical place, Little Bush. I was lucky to go there with our biodiversity team, and the amazing trapping work that you do, it's quite unheard of in Hawke's Bay, so thank you very much. And I'll just open the floor up for questions from our committee. Yeah, you've always gone. Councillor Foss.
Just thanks so much. It's just such a pleasure for a group to come here and just deliver thanks as you did. So it's just absolutely noted and really appreciated. Thank you. But get down to the gnarly business of pests, possums, stoats, and ferrets. You've obviously got a plan there now and ongoing. Is there? It's obviously constant vigilance there. I think you said dock, or was it a dock trap? Have put new traps in there or something? Have you lifted up the game of trapping or something?
Dock 200 traps.
Dock 200 traps.
Supplied by your department.
Yeah. Okay. And have you done any counts? You know.
Yes. Every trip is recorded.
Yep.
All in a notebook, and it will be going on a system that I'll be undertaking with Beau Farnell very shortly.
Great. Love to see
From the start to right up to date. Every day is recorded.
Right, particularly the feral cats. Love to see that trend down.
3, 4 now up there I've caught in the last 10 years.
Really? Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
Any other questions? Can we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Williams and a seconder. Councillor Van Dijk. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Well, thank you. Yes, I'd like just to share an observation and a reflection. Thank you again to our current team of deputants. But it occurs to me that we're in a situation of here where the whole is great. You know, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. In other words, we have now 3 deputations representing very concerned community groups active on the ground. You are examples of good work that is being done throughout the region, all of which energy and enthusiasm we need to harness and coordinate. And I suspect reflects actually there's a lot of latent energy and enthusiasm out there which is untapped. And so my challenge to the council and to the community is to how do we better coordinate, harness and channel that social ecology, if I can put it that way, because if we are going to achieve our strategic objectives as a council, we're not going to do it alone. We're incredibly rate stressed. Our objectives and our challenges are utterly immense. And so I just ask us all to think about how the very good examples of work that you bring to our table can exemplify a model for us to together meet these challenges. And I don't know whether it's through our management plan frameworks, it's our Right Tree, Right Place program, or what it is through our long-term plan in the way we support and coordinate these efforts. But that's the thought process that I'm currently in as a result of including your deputation. So thank you.
Councillor Van Beek.
I was just wondering if I could add to the appreciation of our group for the Waitangi Reserve and the cooperation of your staff down there. It's magnificent the way they work in with us, and we've been down there right from the start, and something we'll be with for many, many years to come. Yeah, kia ora. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. When I was thinking about becoming a councillor, I thought, oh, it would be great. You know, we see all these great community projects that are happening, and I haven't actually set foot in one yet, you know, so continue to invite us to come along, and maybe instead of actually having a council day, we actually can hire a small bus, and we can, you know, with social distancing, of course, and we'll go from project to project to actually see and meet you guys and have a cup of tea and maybe a sausage at lunchtime at an appropriate time. Will be really great. A society can't exist without volunteers. You know, if we don't have volunteering, a society will completely break down. So I really appreciate the excellent work that you guys put in, and I agree with Councillor Williams. And maybe we, as a council, ought to develop a framework how we actually work with community groups like yourselves. Some of them can be completely overrunning our staff with questions and demands, and maybe we can work out a system where we actually can supply a good service without actually just giving volunteers cold shoulders. So that's maybe something we can work on in future, so we actually can work better. And we have heard it before from Karamu, the Karamu group, that communication is very important, and maybe we ought to improve somewhat on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll put the motion to the floor that we receive. The Forest and Bird Napier Branch Deputation, Little Bush Reserve. All those that agree, say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for holding out, everyone. We'll have a short cup of tea break, so if you can bring your cup of tea and your snack back to the table. Don't worry, lunch isn't too far away. Okay, and then when we're back